I think the most important thing people need to understand about mental health is that it can be treated like any other physical disease. And I mean that in both good and bad ways, because the truth is that there are people who live with mental illness as a chronic condition for their entire lives. I'm certainly among them. But at the same time, if you do what you need to do to deal with mental health, see a therapist, take medication, take care of yourself, live a active and healthy and productive lifestyle, you can manage your mental illness. I mean, I never use the term you can beat your mental illness, but you can live with it. And quite frankly, if you're lucky enough, you can allow it to teach you lessons that can ultimately improve your life and the lives of those around you. Two reasons. First of all, it's my constituents. 1 in 5 Americans actively suffer from some sort of mental illness. As many as 1 in 2 will over the course of their lifetime. Rates of mental illness are skyrocketing across the board, but particularly among young adults and teenagers. I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. I worry about them all the time. These are more than just people. These are real faces. They're my constituents who are in pain and who suffer and who deserve the same care and opportunities that everybody should be blessed to have. But second of all, it's also me. I've had a major depressive disorder and a generalized anxiety disorder probably my whole life, but I was diagnosed when I was 18. Since that day, I've been on medication. I've been in and out of therapy as needed. But again, I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to get the care that I need and live the life that I think everybody deserves. And because I've been lucky enough to have the resources I need, I think everybody should. There's the obvious answers, which is I see a psychiatrist, I take my medication, and I see a therapist as needed. There are times where I can go months without seeing a therapist. Then there's other times I'm in, I'll call it a maintenance period. I see my therapist right now like once a month, once every 2 to 3 weeks, depending. There's times when I go to therapy on a more regular basis. I lost my dad about 6 months ago. I was definitely going on a weekly basis at the time. So that's the medical side. But on the other side, managing mental illness is also about lifestyle choices. It's about healthy relationships. It's about helping your partner. I'm lucky I have a wonderful wife. We've been married 14 years, and she knows how to help me manage my mental illness and when to say to me, I think you need to go talk to your therapist. It's also about lifestyle choices like eating right, getting sunshine, exercising. I genuinely think that this is at least partially something to do with it. I have definitely become a bit of a gym fiend, and exercise helps me in a big way. But also knowing when you need to push yourself, knowing when it's like, okay, I'm tired, it's been a long week, I just want to go relax, and actually sitting down on the couch and, bed rotting as the term is. But also knowing when it's like, okay, I need to actually get out and do something social and not cancel those plans, because I know I'm tired, I know I don't feel like it, but I also know after I see my friends, I'm going to feel better. That takes a lifetime to learn, and I will never ever pretend to have all the answers for how to manage my own mental illness, because if I did, I feel like I'd probably feel better all the time as opposed to just most of the time. But last, it's also about giving yourself the grace to make mistakes and not beat yourself up when you get scared, when you get anxious, when you feel generally depressed, when your thoughts get dark. Having that grace for yourself and giving yourself the same sense of forgiveness that you give to other people is hugely, hugely important, especially if you have a major depressive disorder, when guilt and shame really start to beat you up. I have a partial answer, but it's definitely not a complete one. We've been able to get a few pieces of policy introduced in the law in Pennsylvania, a couple of suicide prevention measures at colleges. We put in some means reduction where we required our Department of Transportation to consider adding fencing if a spot was a suicide hotspot. But the truth is that we've got such a long way to go in Pennsylvania, like most places. Last year, we had a $100 million mental health package pass the House but die in the Senate. This year, we're trying again. I'm reluctant to say I have an accomplishment that I'm most proud of from a legislative perspective, because there's so much on the table. There's so much that we are still trying to do. But what I will say is I think in some way, by talking about my own mental illness, which I've been doing for about a decade, I think and I hope I've made it easier for other elected officials, but even more importantly, regular constituents, citizens and residents of Pennsylvania, to talk about their own struggles. Because while we've made massive strides over the past few decades, and even the past decade, we've got a long, long way to go before people talk about their depression and their anxiety and their addictions in the same breath that they talk about having a sore leg. And that's where I want to ultimately bring this conversation. That's not something that I'll ever accomplish, because one person can't accomplish that. But also, I don't know how we ultimately get there in the long run, except by continued sustained effort to normalize this conversation. And I truly believe that when we completely normalize mental illness, or come as close to it as reasonably possible, that's when we're going to achieve the public policy gains that we absolutely have to accomplish. I've got two things in particular that I'm trying to make happen. Governor Shapiro, on a legislative end for his budget, proposed a really strong mental health budget that does a lot for counties, for crisis centers, for 988, and for school-based behavioral health. There's one piece I want to add to that, which is the workforce piece. From a public policy perspective, the biggest challenge in mental health, bar none, is the lack of workforce. If we don't have anybody to provide treatment, we're ultimately not going to get anywhere. So that's one thing that I'm looking to get. On the other side, talking about schools, we know that kids are suffering the most from behavioral health issues. And what we need to do, I think, is a better job of actually capturing when these kids are suffering and steering them towards the resources that they need. I've got a piece of legislation that we circulated a co-sponsorship memo for, hoping to introduce it this week, that would fund behavioral health screenings in schools to the tune of $10 million. It's something I know is a big policy of Inseparable. It's actually where I got a lot of the information, and we're hoping to get that into the House before the budget is ratified, God willing, by June 30th, so that this can be a piece of the budget. We can do even more to help find kids who are suffering and get them the treatment they need.
Now it's your turn. Why is mental health important to you? Post on social media with the hashtag Take5 for Mental Health.